it's not about I, it's about the we. If you're saying I at the beginning of a sentence, then you take that to your manager. But if you start with we, then we want to hear what you've got to say.
People are now vested. They have a vested interest in wanting the business to do well, because if the business does well, they get something back out of it in return. Hey everyone, we are back with a brand new episode of the Vibrant Workplace podcast, proudly supported by NI Job Finder. That's the place where you'll find vibrant workplaces offering quality careers. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm Craig Thompson, founder of Vibrant Talent. We facilitate the Vibrant Workplace Accelerator, a unique 12-week cultural enhancement program powered by insights from our employee experience platform, Mookie. But what are we doing here today? Well, on this show, we invite leading employers and industry thought leaders so we can explore ideas and encourage a movement towards a better working world for both employers and employees. Today, I'm joined by Chairperson of the Board from Employee Ownership Ireland, Karen Maguire. Karen's going to share with us her own journey with transitioning her business into an employee ownership trust, why she made the choice, and why other company owners should consider doing the same. Karen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Craig. Thanks very much for having me.
Delighted to have you here. And I think this is a really interesting topic that we can unpack today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background to begin with, Karen? Ultimately, growing your business and what brought you to the point of deciding then to transfer it into an employee ownership trust?
Okay. I set up GRP systems, which was then become Relinia 20 years ago, literally really around this time. And it was a company that manufactures supplies into the construction sector, a fiberglass or a glass reinforced plastic alternative to steel structures and platforms. And so we would maybe have targeted the pharmaceuticals, the water, the electricity industries. And I built the business up to a point where really, we were getting into a real good growth phase and whatnot. And then I made a choice that I felt that I wanted to explore other options. So I looked at how I was going to move the business on and succession within the business. And I decided to opt for an employee ownership trust model, which basically means that you sell your shares to a trust, and the trust then operates the company, or not operates the company, but it oversees the operation of the company for the beneficiaries of the beneficiaries who are the employees.
Okay. And that was going to be my first question. My first real question actually is, for those who are listening, what actually is an employee ownership trust, and how does it differ from the likes of profit sharing or, giving equity to the workforce?
What essentially happens is I was the sole shareholder, and I sold my shares into a trust model. Employee ownership trusts were created by the coalition government, and it was really just to encourage employee ownership and make it a model that was relatively easy and smooth to work with. So I sold my shares into the trust, and so the trust, through company profits, then pays me basically, what the agreed price was for the sale. And the way the structure works, there's a trust board that operates, that basically works in a way that oversees the operations board. So there's still an operational board that's run by the directors of the business, and they then are accountable to that trustee board. But the trustee just oversees that main operations board. So it still runs like a business, essentially.
Okay. And who decides then who is on the trust board?
Well, initially, I would have done that through the sale agreement. Okay, so the shareholders, there's a share agreement and whatnot. So I had initially set up how the board was to look like. But generally, you will always have to have an independent trustee as part of the board. Okay, and at the time that would have been our accountant, and then there's an employee representative as well, who is generally voted in by the employees, and then there's other members. So I can be there as a founder, there may be somebody there from the operational board. So it just really, but as long as you have those two key individuals, the independent and the employee, which is the main requirement.
Okay, so you reached a point where you had decided you were ready to sell the business. And did you already know about this, employee ownership trust model, or where did this come from for you?
There's a bit of a story to this one. Look, I had like basically I was considering a sale. I was looking at succession. As me as a sole shareholder, and I had no children. Okay, so succession was becoming something that had to be was on the table. Okay, I had to consider it, and I was looking at options, and I kind of got myself. There was a point where I built the business up to a level, and things were going extremely well. And then there was just some family circus. My father unfortunately passed away. And I just really felt that the passion for me within the business just kind of went after that. He was my wingman.
Okay.
He was my real support network. And it just felt it was like a struggle going into work. And I think, I was talking the other day to a group of women, and I was just saying, you have to have, when you're running a business, you have to have that passion. And when the passion goes, it's really hard. It's like pushing a rock up a hill.
Yeah.
And I just felt that, just it wasn't working. I needed to see what other options were available. So I looked at a third party sale, and I've said this on a few occasions. I went into these meetings, and I honestly basically felt I was like a little bit dirty. It just didn't feel right. Okay. It just felt that, it was just a conversation about me and what I was looking for, and a third party who had no involvement within the business. They didn't know the individuals within the business. They had no interest in, in the community. And I just thought, no, this just doesn't feel right. So then I explored the management buyout option, and that wasn't doable. Okay, the main management team weren't in a position to be able to do that. And it was literally in passing on one of the conversations I had with an M&A company about employee ownership trusts. And it was like, when I heard it, I thought, what's that? Okay, and it just caught my attention. And so I went and looked into it. I started looking into it, and the more I looked into it, the more I went, why haven't I heard about this? This sounds absolutely amazing. It allowed me to reward the people that had helped me get the business to where it got to, which was really important to me. Okay. But it also allowed me to exit on my terms as well. And also it was a way of ensuring that the business would stay within the local area and continue to employ people, which was really, really important to me. And that was a concern. Like, my options at the time would have probably been selling to a competitor. And ultimately, when that happens, they immediately come in and jobs start to go. Okay. Accounts might have gone, the marketing might have gone, like it was guaranteed, because they're trying to consolidate their resources. And so jobs would have gone. And I think for me, around the time, basically when we were looking at all of this, then Chain Reaction went to the wall in Doak. Okay, they announced the closure of the facility at Doak, and that was 200 direct jobs that went. Never mind the wider supply chain. So it's we're based in Crumlin, so it was a huge hit on the community. I knew people who worked there, and I just thought, I don't want this for Millennia. I want something else. Okay, so. That's when I really, really started to we started to look at it more in depth as well. But then COVID came along and things were put on the back burner, and I kind of got a bit of a mojo back, to be honest. I like a challenge, and that was a challenge, let's say. Yeah. And then look, just afterwards we were back into the same routine. My mum passed away then as well, so it was just one like snowball after another. And I just got back to that same point. And so then in 2022, I made the decision to move the business into an employee ownership trust.
Okay. I mean, a lot of what you're saying here really resonates with me. And I keep thinking, it almost sounds too good to be true. And I know that that's kind of what you talked about when you came across this. You thought, what? This sounds amazing. And I'm curious. So you've decided that you want to sell the business, and through this, you're able to sell the business. So you are going to get money out of the business, but you're able to do it in more of a way with a soul, really, that leaves the business doing good and serving the people who worked with you and built the business, grew the business to what it is. What's the downside? Why do more people not do this?
First of all, I think people don't know about it. Okay. It's like, I literally came across it by accident. There was no other companies in Northern Ireland at that time that had gone down this route. Okay. So first of all, the issue here is that nobody knows about it. Secondly, there's this whole idea, it's a co-op. And it's like, and co-ops in this country don't, basically don't have the best reputation. It's seen much more from the farming community. So immediately then that's negated. So those to me are the main kind of barriers that we're trying to overcome. Okay. But once we are able to get people in a room and start telling them about this, then things start to click. And yes, look, it might not suit every business. Okay. It's not, it's that, very much it's there has to be, like an idea of like, what's happening, and there has to be a consideration about succession. What are we going to do with this business further down the line when the founder is no longer there? There might be family involved. So if there is family, and like, one of my the people involved, Aidan O'Neill, who's involved in the Employee Ownership Trust Ireland organisation, he's got a family business there, and his concerns is later generations. He's second generation. His third, fourth generation is going to be wanting and willing to take on the business. So every business person, every founder, every owner should be considering succession. And our priority is actually about, this might not be the model they take, but as long as it's on the table, okay, and at least consider it, then I will have thought that Employee Ownership Ireland will have done its job. But that for me is, and the organisation, that is the main priority. And it's about building awareness of that at the moment. There's other things that we can support businesses with, but that is the priority. Is this on the table? Has it been considered? If it's ruled out, then fair enough. But it'll be a frustration if it's not there.
Yeah. So do people even know about it to begin with? When you say it's a co-op and that puts people off, what do you mean by that?
I think the co-op, like I was, and if you go to like outside of Ireland, like, like I was at, I think I was like, we're talking about you're living in Barcelona for a while, and we're talking, there's a Spanish model, and it's very much the co-op based, and it's really, it's I can't remember the name, Montesquieu or something. I think it's kind of, the name of it doesn't come to my head, but it's a whole region that this priest set this up after the Second World War, and it's hugely successful. But the co-op model in that co-op ownership model in Ireland, it seems to be very much focused towards the rural, like like your the milk boards and that type of thing. Okay, and I suppose it's like it's everybody, everybody, the employees essentially running the show, and so I suppose that's where the perception comes. And it's funny, that's what we get asked a lot. Where do the employees fit into the equation? The employees fit into the equation. The employees are still employees. They are still employed by a business that is run by an operations board. So it still runs like a business. But ultimately, the business is being run in a way to benefit the employees. So the employees don't own shares per se. They are beneficiaries of that share ownership. So that's really where the difference comes.
Okay, so when we think about how the business actually operates and how it operated before this and how it operates after it, what changes in terms of day-to-day business and how decisions are made in the business, etc.? What is different about the running of the business once it transitions into an employee ownership trust?
Nothing, essentially. The business can still function, still operate in exactly the same way as it's always done. So I think another concern is when you sell a business, is from the supply chain and from your customers, what's going to change. And it's something that we did. Part of our communication was whenever we announced this, we'd previously communicated with our supply chain and with our customer base that this is what we're planning. This is what's happening within the business, but nothing's going to change. The people that were running the business before are still there running the business. So ultimately, it's from that perspective, it's actually better than a trade sale. Okay, there's no disruption, and for us, the only thing that changed with Relinia was because, I just felt that again, as part of the whole succession issue, that the people that I was wanting to the management team there, I felt that I wanted them to step up. So I stepped down as a managing director, but kept on a technical role as a technical director. So that was the only real change within the organization at that point. Okay. But then, as you go through the whole, through the transition period, basically they start to get, find their feet in terms of actually, how they want to run the business themselves. So things do ultimately change over time, but ultimately they, they stay pretty much the same, still the same people in charge.
So in terms of decision makings, and the strategy and the direction of the business, does that mean that the employees are then involved in decision making?
To a certain extent, but what happens is if we have a quarterly trustee meeting, and before that meeting, the employee representative will go, and there's a number of mechanisms that you can use. You can use councils or whatever. It's just it's how to get the employee voice onto the board. And so, our employee representative will go speak to the staff and really just come back with, what the staff are saying. And it was funny, for the last board meeting, he went out and he came back with a list, and you open it up and you go, oh God, right, okay, what's coming? But as you start to go through the list, okay, initially we had, I want more holidays. I want to work a 4-day week. It's just, but notice they're all I's. They're all the I's. Okay, I want this. I want that. And another organisation, White Ink, who are also on the board, and Joan from White Ink is on the board. They've got a saying within White Tech: it's not about I, it's about the we. So if you're saying I at the beginning of a sentence, then you take that to your manager. But if you start with we, then we want to hear what you've got to say. And I think, I really love that strap line.
Love that.
Yeah, it's just, and so what happened was then we put, as well as that, we had a suggestion box, and then you start to get things coming in, like, where, for example, the last one was, we think a trolley might work better around the saw. We've sourced the trolley. This is the price of the trolley. This is what was coming back, okay? And we believe the reason why we think the trolley will be beneficial is because it's going to reduce the amount of things that we're carrying, or and they came back with a reason why they thought a trolley was useful, and they came back with where they had sourced the trolley and how much it was going to cost. And that's just one example. We found that out of the list, I think of about 14 or 15 items, there was probably 90% of them were there about how to make improvements on the shop floor, for example. And it was just the small things. We always say, if you improve the small things, if you deal with the small things, okay, those are easy wins, okay. And it's like, one of them was a hand dryer instead of paper towels. It's just, they're easy wins. And if you're giving them those wins, then they feel that their voice is being heard as well. And a lot of that can be dealt with at the operations level. Like the trust board doesn't need to know a lot of that, and they can be dealt with at the operations level or at management level. And so what we've found over the years that we have, we went from EOT that the employee voice is getting much more mature, and actually it becomes more about actually what is it, how can we benefit not only ourselves but the benefit the business as well.
I mean, this is a really interesting angle with all of this, is and something that I think would really appeal to a lot of business owners is we talk about employee engagement, and sometimes I think that we're a bit unrealistic, okay? Because we talk about, we want employees to be engaged almost to the extent that owners are engaged, but why would they be when they're not owners? They don't have a meaningful, piece of the pie. So are you saying what you've seen then is that it almost builds more ownership, more accountability, and people lean in more and they care more about the business and the performance of the business because of this model? Yeah.
Look, there's, just to give you a bit of context, right? So there's a couple of, there's the government put in a couple of incentives in terms of the employee ownership trust model, okay? The first one was from a founder's perspective, where basically the sale doesn't incur any capital gains, okay? So you can sell the business and there's no capital gains tax to be paid. But also as well, you need to be paid out of profit, okay? So, the company needs to be generating profit. And generally, if you have a third-party sale, they increase the profit by reducing the resources, they combine resources, which you can't do in an EOT. So, there's a balance there between actually what the sale price is and actually what the company can afford. On the other side, then, from an employee's perspective, the government has said you can give your employees up to £3,600 per year tax-free.
Okay.
So there's national insurance to be paid on that, but there's no income tax paid. So part of the transition, part of the setup I had made for the transition from, obviously when during the payback period to myself, was that I wanted to make sure there was enough profit left within the organisation. After I was paid, to ensure that we could pay the maximum bonus to the staff during that period. So for us, the government tends to be quite strict about the qualification period, about qualification criteria. So it generally tends to be length of service, hours worked, or level of pay. I picked the length of service. So any employee that's worked with me, with the organisation for more than 2 years, will get 100% of the bonus. If it's between 1 and 2, they get 50%. And we paid that within 3 months of going EOT. Okay, so we paid the first half of that tranche within, we pay it twice a year. But it has to be paid out of profits. If the profits aren't there, they don't get, that bonus does not happen. And then, that's said to them that, that is really important. And that's really communicated. So it's not an expectation. So what you start to see happening, with that bonus, first of all, is, I know there's other bonus schemes available and stuff, but definitely what we started to see was they start to be accountable to each other. They start holding each other to account, and picking up things earlier, where, in the production series where it might have been let go, turning out lights, it's just resin. If they're using resin, trying to make sure that they're only using as much resin as they really need for that particular job. So all these wee things, like we had tried this stuff before. We tried to bring incentive schemes and everything else, and they'd work for a while, but then somebody just goes like, I don't know, maybe it was our communication or whatever, I don't know, but they just didn't seem to stick. This seems to be sticking because it's like, they know that if they contribute and they have a say in this, they can, if there's profit made and they don't get a bonus, the employees can say, well, hang on a minute, what's going on here? They have a voice, and they can exert that voice within the trust board. And again, because they're beneficiaries of the business, they have to take priority in terms of the profitability, the profits and whatnot as well, in terms of the bonus schemes as well. So that has to be seen as well. So definitely that has been a big factor. Like for another example, another organization, a lot of organizations will try and pay, some companies, whenever they transition, the priority is about paying the owner. But then I would say it's really important that if you're doing this, that the employees have to have an understanding that, I am here, I can benefit from this. And that's when you start to get the buy-in. You start to feel that actually we do have skin in the game. And if we do this right and we try and make this, increase the profitability, we're going to get a share of that as well. So that's what's really good about this model. And with the trust element to it, it means that they have a voice in that too.
So the 3-6 is the point at which it's capped, because after that, the government, they're going to, impose taxes, etc., on the employees. But if the business was absolutely smashing it, because I'm thinking, if you turned around to me, if I'm an employee in the company and you said to me, the better the business does, the better I'm going to do. I'm going to work at 200% capacity. I'm going to give it absolutely everything because I know it's going to be better for me and it's going to help my family, etc. So is that on the table as well then through this, or does it have to be capped at 3-6?
No. The reason why the cap is there is because that's the tax-free element of it. You could pay each employee, if the money's there, you could pay each of them 10 grand. You know what I mean? It's just, that's when the tax implication comes in. But bearing in mind, the company still has to run in a way that's sustainable. So it has to look to the future. How does it grow? How does it invest? So it may be that the company may decide, that actually, there's profits there. A certain percentage of the profits after the founder is paid, a certain percentage of the profits go towards the profit share. A certain percentage can go towards investment. So that's where the flexibility comes in. And so the operations board would say, look, we need to keep so much, so much of the profit aside, because this is what our plan is for the future. This is part of our strategic plan which has been agreed by the trust board. This is how we want to progress this business. This is what we believe we need in order to progress that. And then you look at what's left in the pot, essentially, and then the decisions are made between the two boards about what happens with that.
I'm still sitting here and I'm thinking, what is the reason why people would not be doing this? Because I've always felt like, for me, look, I'm not anti-capitalist, but I am pro a more social form of capitalism. Okay, I believe that there's way too much money concentrated in way too few hands. And I think that the people who generate the profits get the least back as a return on their investment of a lifetime spent at work. And I've always felt that there should be a model for profit sharing in every business, but I didn't really know the ins and outs of how that might work. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, I don't understand where the downside is, because you're selling the company, you're still getting the return. So you're still selling it, you're still getting something out of it. You're putting the business into the trust. The trust is going to oversee and protect the interests of the business and ensure that the business has a future. People then that work in the business are getting money out of it. I guess is the only risk here, if the business is not profitable, then the owner, what happens for the owner? You just don't get then?
You don't get paid. You don't get paid. You know, it's there's no other mechanism to get paid. You know, like, so, you know, you know, like that was, you know, Linear was 20 years of my life. You know, it wasn't, you know, there was ups and downs, but there was a lot of sacrifice, and, you know, I wanted to sell, you know, obviously this was a position, but I, you know, there was a price paid for that, but, you know, you take compromises in terms of that. Okay. And, but that what's, you know, unless you have a business to pay you back, you don't get paid. So that is the risk factor. So a lot of people might just be in a position where they just want to take the money, okay, and go, and that from day one. But generally with private equity, for example, you don't get out on day one, okay, and there's maybe a drawdown period or whatever. And, you know, I've heard statistics that most, you know, basically owners who, when they exit a business, I think it's something like 90% don't have a great experience, okay, and that's a shocking statistic if you really think about it. And you know, this for one issue. Another, like, I think, you know, it's definitely an issue there that you're selling the, you know, you're giving up the baby. For me, you know, it was my baby, you know, and but ultimately I knew I knew going forward there was other people better placed within the organization that could take that baby and you know, I had nurtured and got it to a point, but there was other people better suited to take it on to the next point.
So I guess from that, how do you mitigate that risk? If you're the owner and if you're thinking there is a risk here, if I sell the business, if I put it into this trust and the business doesn't do well, I could get nothing back out of it. What are the steps that you could take? What can you put in place to give the business the best chance of success?
A fair valuation being one. The first thing is a fair valuation. Okay, if the valuation is not fair and reasonable, it's going to be a real struggle for the business to be able to do the payback. Okay, so for example, like, you know, in my own situation, I had thought, like, what's a fair value for this business? Okay, you know, and we came very close to that figure in terms of where we are. Then you decide, actually, you know, what's the payback period? And I'd initially decided, you know, I thought 5 years was reasonable. I really didn't want to take it on any more than 5 years, because it's like, you know, you're getting to a point where everybody's going, are we ever going to pay this woman off this year? You know, are we ever going to get to financial freedom? And having a structure within that payback that is reasonable, that the company can sustain that, you know, that over that period of time. And then the final thing is actually having a management structure that is workable, that you've got management team there that are committed and are prepared to stay with the business to basically drive and are looking to drive the business on. So those are the three key criteria of whether you get paid back or not. And it all starts from the valuation. And I think the government has recognised that, you know, the government made some changes to the OT model back in the October, November time, where the trust board are responsible to make sure the valuation is fair. That actually wasn't in there before. So it's to make sure the valuation is fair and reasonable. So there is a legal requirement there now. But like, for example, like, I mentioned there, I decided on 5 years, but, we transitioned in March 2022. Ukraine got invaded in February 2022, and it just, everybody hit the panic button. And I looked at it and I thought, like, I do want to proceed with this. Why don't we go then through, extend the payback period by 2 years, which I wasn't comfortable with. But we had already a cash sweep mechanism, which meant if there was surplus cash within the business, over and above what was required for working capital and for the payment of the bonuses, which were the 2 priorities, then that cash could have been swept across to myself with agreement from both boards.
Right.
And we've been able to implement that, which meant then we've gone from, my initial wish of 5 years, I got my full payout within 3 years. So we hit financial freedom there back in March of this year.
Brilliant.
Which is incredible,
I would love to put my platform in there. I would love to have put my platform in there before all this and after, and see what is the difference in terms of the engagement scores before and after. Maybe you've already done that, have you? Have you sort of measured before and after to see
look, we did an engagement survey back there in January, and it came out really high. The scores across the board were really, really high. But we didn't have a base level to work on, so I would have hoped it would be pretty high anyway, but I think, it's, as well as it's about educating the staff and getting their buy-in and enforcing the fact that, they have a voice, they've got something we want to hear, and we want their contribution. And that is really, really important, because if you don't have that, and if you don't have that buy-in, then it just becomes like literally another organization with argues would have been somebody else at the top. So it's about reinforcing that, regularly, and the whole communication piece as well is really, really important. So yeah, it's just keep communicating with the staff, and it will move forward.
What sort of businesses have you found that this works best in?
I think across the board, like within, the UK, generally the biggest uptake of EOTs is the professional services, like your, like, for example, architects and consultancy, like engineering consultancies and whatnot. So, for example, there was another company here went EOT this week, and it was an engineering consultancy, or last week, sorry, an engineering consultancy. So that professional services seems to work very, very well. Because like you've got a staff who are all kind of working quite collaboratively anyway, and things like that. Manufacturing would tend to be the next area, but we and it's so the manufacturing sector is so important for Northern Ireland. Look, we have huge manufacturing, resource here. Okay, so many businesses are involved in the manufacturing in this country, and it's so important to the wealth of every individual within this country as well. The success of these businesses, and like Mid-Ulster is a perfect example. And the companies there are hugely successful, and they're getting approached on a constant basis by outward investors from the likes of the UK, Europe, and the US and China. They're constantly getting a knock on the door about, do you want to sell your business? And the fear is, if those businesses are sold to those outside parties, what's going to happen to those jobs, and what's going to happen to those businesses within Mid-Ulster is a perfect example. I think a good analogy is like you mentioned there about, all the money sitting with one person. So, if all the money, if you sell your business to an outside party, all the profits then leave the country for one thing. Okay, so that profit's gone. With an EOT, if you're giving out, that bonus scheme, there you go. You've got money that's going to each individual. Okay, and because it's relatively a small amount of money for a lot of those individuals, a huge amount of money. Yep. They're going out and spending that in their local community. They're actually putting out there. It's not going to buy a yacht or going into investments. It's going out into the local community, and it's going out and being spent and growing that, growing like Northern Ireland PLC. So I think that's really one of the pluses about where the benefit of this model comes in to the country as a whole. And Scotland has recognised it, which is the reason why they've really pushed forward on this. And the whole AOT model has been hugely successful. I think they've got the guts of 300-400 AOT businesses in Scotland.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah,
we're sitting at 14 at the moment. But it's growing. In January 2022, we had 1. Okay. Today we're sitting at 14. And, and some of those are like S&W and Newry, which employ 200 to 300 people. You've got Gilbert Ash, who just announced there a few weeks ago, huge construction a company, again with 200 odd employees. So, it's getting out there. The message is getting out there. But that employee base of about the 20 to 50 is the real sweet spot for EOTs, and it's where the majority of the EOTs in England tend to be. That's where they tend to be.
What is the reason for that? What is the reason why it's 20 to 50 and not more of the 200 to 500, etc., and bigger again?
I think it's hard for me to say in terms of because all I know is my experience. We employ 35 people, and it's just you have a structure, you have a management structure there. You can see, you've got a strategic plan going forward for the business. It's all quite compact. You know what's happening. I suppose for a bigger organisation, there's maybe more shareholders involved.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more dynamics. It's just a harder deal to get over the line, I suspect. Yeah. And there's a lot more things to account for as well. And there's one thing I didn't mention actually is you don't have to, with an EOT model, you have to sell at least 51% of your shares. Okay. So you can hold on to shares if you choose. I chose not to, because I just felt that, if I was stepping away from the business, then the people that were going to take the business on to the next level should be benefit, and I'm getting my benefit. But it's just that's what's so good about this model is there's that flexibility within it that, you can make the choices. You can choose how much share value you're going to sell, as long as it's at more than that 51%. You can choose how you're going to fund it. So we mentioned there about funded out of profits. I took was cash in the business as well there, so I was able to access that. But you can also look at debt finance as well. There's that potential there as well. It's a bit harder, but most models tend to be just vendor financed, where the employee, the company pays you back out of profits. And obviously, then there's flexibility with the bonus schemes and things there as well.
Should the owner stay involved in some capacity? Because one of the things that I'm wondering is, you're this fearless visionary leader who has built the business and everybody looks up to, and everybody takes confidence from you. And in one hand, you could say, well, no matter what happens, if you sell the business or if you put it into a trust, either way, that visionary leader is stepping away. But in some respects, you might not care as much if you're selling the business to private equity, whereas you still need to get your profit back out of the business. So is there any kind of risk that, if the owner of the company, the founder of the company completely steps away, that the people working in the business lose faith and confidence in the business, and therefore should that founder in some capacity stay involved?
Again, it depends. I chose to stay involved, for periods obviously during the transition period, okay, because obviously it was making sure about, it's like, that things were still, okay, because obviously there was money still owed to myself. But I had confidence in the management team. I knew, and there is oversight there from the trust board as well, as just making sure that things are still good, like the accounts are reviewed quarterly. So that all still happens. But I suppose, I think, look, with anything in life, there is risk. There's risk if you sell to private equity, whether, you will get the true realization of the sale price. Okay. And a lot of times that doesn't actually happen. So, there's that risk there. But I think there's also the risk with private equity of losing the culture within the organization as well. And I think with an EOT model, that is significantly less. The culture tends
Yeah.
to stay the same, or it's maybe just slightly, but you still got that, you still got that small business ethos and whatnot. And
Hmm.
and again, that whole idea that everybody's in it together.
Hmm.
So I think that's all really important. But look, yes, there's also for me as well, look, there's something I did realize when you do hand over the reins that I probably didn't really realize beforehand, and that whole reflection piece. Whenever you kind of say, and people will say this, when you say you're going,
Hmm.
generally, probably you should just go. And
Yeah.
in some ways, I felt like a bit like the mother-in-law in the house after the kids had got married. They're
Okay.
doing their own thing, and
Okay.
I'm still there going, it's like I'm still here, and that's hard. From a founder's point of view, that is really, really hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's an argument. Should you just stay in charge, and then, but you've got to cut the apron strings at some point. You've made this
Hmm.
choice to sell the business.
Hmm.
And you've got to let that business move forward, okay?
Hmm.
And ultimately, it should be able to move forward without you. And
Hmm.
that's what Relinia has been able to do. And yeah, that, for an ego point of view, that's tough. It is tough.
Yeah.
They're like, sales are increasing, blah blah blah. And it's like, you're thinking, is there a bit of you saying, like, that you're missing out on something, I suppose, in a certain way. But in the end of the day,
Okay.
you've made the call. You've made your bed, and I
Yeah.
think definitely it's having that reflection piece, maybe beforehand, and about what that'll
Yeah.
feel like is probably a good idea, actually.
I think it must be more difficult, though, and more uncomfortable when you sell the business to private equity, but then you stay on for a transition period, and now the business is not yours, but you're still involved in the business, and you've got these people who are trying to cut and cut and cut, and
Yeah.
you had this thing that was your baby, and you were so passionate about it, and you grew it, and now someone else is turning it into a monster, and I think that must be very difficult. Whereas I imagine with this EOT model, yeah, it's still uncomfortable, it's still upsetting, and you feel like you're losing out. You're wondering if you made the right decision, etc. But you're leaving the business in the hands of people that you know and trust.
I think that's it, and we're already looking at succession for the next group. What I mean? So that's already happening.
Hmm.
But yeah, look, you sell to a third party, you lose control of what you can do. Okay, yes, you're still
Hmm.
selling to a trust, so there is still an element of loss of control, and you've got to accept that. Okay, but you are, it's still the same people that you've been working with, and
Hmm.
you know, and you're still part of that equation there as well. But definitely the whole private equity side of things, what I mean, my whole thing, well, the way I set the business up was very much customer focused. It was like I had worked for big organizations, and it was just, and I was operating as a sales capacity over here, and they were
Hmm.
letting customers down. It just wasn't as a salesperson, you go in, you make promises to your customer about X, Y, and Z, and they were failing on those promises on a regular basis. And I found,
Hmm.
I decided I was going to do better myself, which is why, the company came into existence. So, but that whole customer ethos was so important to me, okay, and
Hmm.
so important to the growth of the business as well. And that concern is like, if a bigger organization come in, would that go? With the importance of the employees and where they fit into the equation go? And
Hmm.
you know that's all a concern, all right. But if you sell to the big boys, there that's the risk. you know
Is there any risk in terms of, I mean, what I'm really interested in is how we build a better working world. And, from day one, when I set up my business, it was about how we build a better working world for both employers and employees. It's got to work for both for it to be sustainable. And when I looked at this topic, and the reason I invited you onto the show is because I think a lot of the time you look at these employee engagement models and these graphics that go around LinkedIn and stuff, and it always baffles me. They talk about stuff like purpose and connection and all this stuff, which is all very important stuff, but they always seem to conveniently leave out money as something which is important to employees. We go to work to get paid, and
yeah.
people spend 100,000 hours of their lives at work. They deserve to get paid and to get well paid. So I when I see these models and they conveniently forget to talk about things like money, I just think like, what is the motive behind that? But if we want employees to come to work, truly engage, want to give their all, want to participate and contribute, which is what engagement is about. It's not just, we don't just want smiley, happy faces. It's great to have smiley, happy faces, but we want more than that. We want people to come to work to make an impact with the work that they do. I look at this and I think, well, surely this is the best way to make that happen, because people are now vested. They have a vested interest in wanting the business to do well, because if the business does well, they get something back out of it in return. But I just wonder, devil's advocate, is there anything in here? And I can't think of it myself, but is there anything that's not good for the employees in this? Is there anything that they don't like about it?
I don't know, because they haven't said anything to me. You know what I mean? It's like, our survey showed that generally everybody is happy with what's happening. Okay. And initially, yes, there is a concern. Okay. So this is about going back to this whole communication piece. Okay. So we announced to the staff the Christmas before we transitioned about what was happening, explained to them that things wouldn't really change from an operational point of view. They still had their jobs. The management team was still going to be in place. And then we had Andrew Housen came in and explained about what was going to happen, about the I suppose the logistics, the technical side of it. But to be honest, Craig, it just went over their blinking heads. You know what I mean? It's like all they wanted to know was, Karen's leaving. Are our jobs going to be safe? And that's their main their main priority is their job's going to be safe. Yeah. And I think what we've shown over the years is, yes, they're more than safe, okay, and the business is in a position it can grow, and that the promises that we've made have been kept. We're listening to them. I think the one big thing about engagement is, if you go and ask the staff for their feedback, you need to get back to them, okay? If you can't do it, if you can't do something they're asking for, go back to the reasons why you can't do it. And if there's stuff that you blinking can do it and it's easy to do it, then just do it. It's like, it's like, it just makes them feel that their voice is being heard, and it makes sure then that when you go back to them the next time asking for their feedback, they're not going to go, sort it, sure they did bugger all the last time. And they're going to come back with stuff like, like I said to you earlier on, the first ones we were getting was about the pay, about holidays, but we went back and explained that, that's just not feasible. The business will not survive if we put you on a 3-day week, or we give you 50 holidays a year. It's not going to happen. It's just, you will not have a job. Whereas if you go back to them, like one really good example, one of the guys and the suggestions that came across was private healthcare. And he'd been off sick for quite a period of time because he couldn't get treatment, considering we all know what the state of the NHS is in this country at the moment. So he made a suggestion, can we not look at private healthcare? And you always imagine, how much that's going to be. This, is it going to be sustainable? You can't offer it, you can't give it to him. And then if it's a rough year, 2 or 3 years later, take it away from them. You need to make sure that you can sustain it within their, as a staff benefit. And so when we looked into it, we could believe how reasonable it is. If you don't have private healthcare for your employees, go and look at it. Okay. I'm not going to be a because I couldn't believe how reasonable it was. So we were then able to implement that. And that was a significant benefit that the staff could see straight away. And yes, there was a monetary burden on the business, but it was nowhere near as bad as what we thought it was going to be. And it's just having that conversation, and it's just starting to look at those things as well. So that was, for us, that was a big win, big win that we were able to offer the staff. So.
And obviously there is a monetary burden, but at the same time, what's the payoff? Are you having people who are fitter, happier, healthier, coming to work more often? Do they have more connection and loyalty to the company because they feel like the company's looking after them, etc.? So I think when we do these kind of things, if you look at them strategically, there's some things that are ridiculous. There's a lot of stuff in the employee engagement space that you're told, do this to engage your employees, and it's a load of nonsense, and it will never strategically benefit the business. But something like that, something like, the sort of private health, etc.
It's not like for each individual employee, there's not a huge, it's not huge, but it's hugely significant to them. But another thing that we did as well was we said, look, we thought, right, okay, we can't really go down to a 4-day week. They'd asked about a 4-day week. We can't really do that. It doesn't work for us as a business. But what we said, okay, what we can do is let you out early on a Friday. Okay. So we can say, okay, so we'll say like you work longer during the week and you finish at 2 o'clock on a Friday. Okay. So that was something else. So they then felt that they had that benefit coming through. And again, there was no real impact on the business there, from a profitability point of view. So again, that was another, that was a really easy thing that we were able to offer them, that they felt that, that they're listening to us.
So I think, if there's a small business owner listening to this and they're thinking, this is interesting, and I want to know more about it. You're obviously now involved with Employee Ownership Ireland. So how did that come about, and who's involved in Employee Ownership Ireland? And I can imagine, if I was considering transitioning my business to this at the moment, I would want there to be people I could turn to that you probably didn't have a few years ago, people I could turn to, that I could go ask questions, hear from their real lived experiences, not just, theoretically how this will work, but here's how it's actually worked for me in my business. So tell me about Employee Ownership Ireland.
Okay. Yeah. Like you said, when I was doing this, there was nobody, and I was doing it during COVID as well. Okay. So, I was doing my research. I was trying to, and ideally, you want to go and speak to companies that have been through this process. You want to go and speak to the employees. You want to go and speak to the directors. You want to speak to the trustees. And I just wasn't able to do that. I was having Zoom calls like this. It was all new. And, it just didn't feel natural. I know we're all used to it now, but at that time, it just didn't feel natural. You just felt that. And again, I think when you meet somebody face to face, you get more of a connection with them. I think just people are just much more, they're just much more forthcoming in things as well.
I agree.
You can build that, person to person connection. So I wasn't able to do that. Plus, we had no advisors here. I used a guy called Andrew Harrison from Co-Ownership Solutions, who's based in England. Okay. So. But he really sits in that 20 to 50 employee space. So, and Whiting had gone EO just literally a few months before us. I was reading my list because I thought we were going to be the first, but we're claiming to be the first manufacturing company at this stage. And, they're in an architectural space. So it's a different, it's a different business and a different way of operating and everything else. So I was really very much on my own, but I just I was on the train tracks. I decided this was what I wanted to do. This was what I felt was the best thing for the business going forward, and nothing was going to stop me. And I think that's where I was at. But where Employee Ownership Ireland comes in and why it's so important to me is because, I've learned a lot in my journey. Okay, there's things that I maybe are much more important than when you sell your business, and actually you probably appreciated it beforehand. Again, we had no experience in terms of setting up board. We didn't have any board. Okay, it was just me. And so we had to set up a trustee board. We set up an operating board. What does that mean? How does that work? That was all new. Just even like negotiating leases, like there's a whole pile of things there that as an owner, I never had experience of. And within the EOT model, there was really nobody in Northern Ireland here that had the experience either. Like I spoke to my accountant whenever I said, like, have you ever heard of EOTs? And he said, no, I don't know. I have never heard of it. I spoke to some other accountants and, who would have done business sales. And again, they didn't had heard of it. So it's just that awareness wasn't there. And then you go, well, if you've never heard about how you're going to be able to help me. Okay. So you're having to go to England. And who do you speak to in England? I don't know. I don't know any solicitors in England or whatever. So it's building up that professional element, okay, is really important. So that's the first tranche of what we're doing. And then the next thing then is about building up that community. It's about building up a resource that, people who are thinking about employee ownership, that they can go and visit companies that have gone down this route that are local, okay? And they can hear firsthand what the experience has been like. But also then about training too, like for example, the employee trustee, our employee trustee, we're asking him to look at accounts and everything. No, never had to do that before. So to make them as valuable as they can, trying to provide them with some training. Like the Employee Ownership Association in England, it's a UK-wide organisation that represents employee ownership, is an absolutely fantastic organisation and really, really good resources. But, the market here is so small for them, there was nobody there was no like workshops or anything based here.
Mhm.
And that's what we're just trying to do. We're trying to work in partnership with Employee EOA to try and build up that ecosystem here. All right. And to try and get ourselves in a position where we're looking at 200-300 EOT businesses further down the line. And
Okay.
training, I mentioned, we talked there about, employee engagement, and we talked about the monetary side, Craig, but training is hugely important. Okay. And it's putting that
Mhm.
resource into training your staff, and your staff feel like they're progressing within the organization. Okay. Yeah. People fear that makes them more poachable, but actually if you get them
Mhm.
that engaged and they don't want to leave, then they become
Yeah.
much more of a resource to you. So,
Mhm.
it's a circle. It's not like they're going to, splinter off. But that will training as well in terms of, how you train, advisors, training your, like people within this, in the organization, engagement training. It's not really this way, but we're providing resources about who, what looks like a good EO business. Okay.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
and trying to bring that to the fore.
It sounds like it would be an incredible resource, and one that I'm sure you wished you had access to.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah. I'm looking at all these things that I'm doing now. I'm looking at one envy. Okay. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I wish this had been in place, because I think my journey was really lonely. Okay. And I
Yeah.
made mistakes. And I think also, see the management team as well, then look back, and it's like, there's things that we'd known beforehand, we could have been having conversations beforehand, but instead we're trying to do it in a room, actually, and things have moved on. So it's just,
Mhm.
I think it's just having those conversations that meant that communication piece, but knowing what the communication piece needs to be. Okay. You only know
Mhm.
what you know.
Yeah.
And I just felt that for me, I was doing the right thing for the business. I was moving it in a way that I felt was sustainable in the long
Yeah.
term. But there's a lot of other things come into play as well. And that's what EOI is about. It's about just, yes, it sounds absolutely amazing. Why isn't everybody doing it?
Mhm.
But it's like, and the ecosystem around EO is so positive, because it is positive. Productivity, the increases in
Mm.
productivity, the increases in staff engagement. It's all evidenced. That's all
Yeah.
evidenced.
Uh-huh.
It's research has been carried out to prove this is the case. EO is good for
Yeah.
businesses. But it's making sure that you can tap into that and get the most out of it. And that's what EOI is about as well.
Is there a way, if I'm a business owner listening, is there a way that I can explore whether this is going to work in my business and what it would look like without fully committing to it?
Yeah. So at the moment, Employee Ownership Ireland are offering free feasibility studies. Bit of a tongue twister, that one. Okay. So, when do you get, I think, free nowadays? So that's 3 days of support and looking at your business to see, is EOT a viable option for it?
Hmm.
Okay. Does it meet the criteria? There's certain criteria. Does it meet the criteria? First of all, what would be an approximate valuation that would be seen as fair? And it's only approximate. And looking at looking at your structures within your business and advising you, actually, well, you're maybe, in terms of how your business operates at the moment, these are things that you maybe need to consider
Hmm.
before you either go EO, or as you basically are transitioning, through that process.
Hmm.
So that's a really valuable resource. So I would advise anybody who is interested in this to go on to the Employee Ownership Ireland website, just employeeownershipireland.com, and look on our website. And if you're interested, you can apply for a feasibility study.
Brilliant.
And somebody will come out, we'll have a chat with you, and produce this report. And at least then you've looked at it, and then you can see whether this is something you want to explore a bit further.
And if I'm a job seeker and I'm thinking, this sounds great, I want to work for a company like that, how would I find companies that, where do I start to look for companies that are run as EOTs?
I suppose it's like, hopefully businesses that are EO are maybe pushing the message out there. I know at Relinia we're pushing out this message consistently, but also you can see from what's happening from the social media what they're doing with employees, and even with just whether the EU or not, are they engaging with their staff? Okay, is there and I think that's what people are looking for now. It's not just a case now. It's funny. It's like when you look at over the years how jobs have changed. It's like, yes, it used to be you go in and you do your job, and you were considered, it was considered you were lucky to have a job. Okay, we're so far away from that now. Okay, and it's a really good space to be, because I think if you value your employees and reward them fairly, feel like develop them through their training and whatnot, and have you will get their engagement. And that makes the business better. It makes their lives better. It's a win-win. The old model was just a win for an individual. You've got like the 35 employees. There's 35 people who have a win.
Yeah. And that leads into what was going to be my last question, which is, what is the sales pitch? Why is this the future for employees, for employers, and for wider society? Why is this the future model that we need to be looking to?
Okay. Look, I think Northern Ireland has and down the south as well, because this model isn't really applicable down there, even though we're Employee Ownership Ireland. But we would hope that things might change with legislation and things down there going forward. But it's just not conducive to it. But if you look, we're reliant, like a lot of, we're quite reliant. We're really pushed forward on outward investment, trying to get outward investment in. Okay. And that's good. It's good. It's growing. Companies like, Allstate Insurance, for example, it is a good model. But also what needs to sit alongside that is actually, what about the businesses that are here, that are locally owned and are really successful? What happens to them? Because something, when they are sold, and if they're sold to an outside body, like I mentioned earlier on, there's the risk of those jobs going. There's a risk of that profit going. More than likely, the profit will go outside the country. Whereas the EU model keeps it within the country, and it makes those businesses basically sustainable within Northern Ireland. And I think with what's happening in the world nowadays, okay, we have to become much more conscious about what we're doing for ourselves. Okay, we can't rely on other places to support us. We have to do this ourselves. Okay, and EOTs and EO is a method of doing that as well. It just gets everybody in the same page. It gets everybody, looking at actually what can we do here to improve our own lives, rather than the lives of an individual further away. I'm
sold. You've sold me, Karen. Listen, good, I'm really, really interested in this space, and I'm looking forward to following your progress with it and seeing the work that Employee Ownership Ireland does over the next couple of years. And hopefully, there'll be a lot more companies that we can look at in the not too distant future. I would encourage people, that feasibility study, it's free. It sounds like would be a really interesting thing to look at for your business, see whether it's an option for you. I guess at that point, you don't have to commit to anything. You can just do the research and find out, is it going to work? How's it going to work? What impact might it make? So definitely do go check that out. Karen, thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing everything that you have with us today. I find it to be a fascinating topic. You're not just talking about this in theory. You've walked this path. So I would really encourage people to have a further conversation with you after today. I hope it's been a positive experience for you, Karen. I hope you've enjoyed coming on the show. I hope it helps to...
Yes, it has, Craig. It's been really good. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you and to talk about it. Look, I have such a passion about this because I really, truly believe it's something that that can benefit a lot of people rather than just a few, and that's why it's so important. But I just also want to add, please look, yes, go on the Employee Ownership Ireland website, but also join Employee Ownership Ireland as well. I forgot to say that. So if you're interested, sign up for the feasibility study. But even if you're just basically interested, join. Basically can join. And I think at the moment as well, you can get free. Basically, you can join free as well with the Employee Ownership Association, which is really good. Okay, so and they've got a huge resource, like I mentioned as well. So just go onto the website and take a look.
Brilliant. Okay. You've got all the information there, so go and check it out. Thank you very much, Karen. Really appreciate everything that you've shared today. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. And if you have, I would really appreciate if you would give it a 5-star rating, a follow, and a share on social media so that we can get these stories out to as wide an audience as possible and help to build a better working world together. That's it for this episode. If your company is struggling with talent attraction, engagement, or retention, why not check out our Vibrant Workplace Accelerator? You can find more details on that on our website, vibranttalent.co.uk. That's it for this episode. See you next time.